It's been exciting, mate. We've been running these obviously fortnightly and really exploring these different topics, which has been great. It's been raising my knowledge, and certainly we've had a great response from the audience as well. So, look, Matt, we might get started. So today's webinar was really about the 3 common tiers to market your commercial property. Now, my name's Soren Reichelt. I'm the head of digital here at Simos, and we're joined by Matt Brown, Director of Sales and Leasing. And Matt, you've already said good morning, but say hello to the audience for us, Matt.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining.
Awesome. All right. Now, before we get started with this topic, just a bit of housekeeping. So it's probably about a 30-minute webinar that we're running through today, exploring that topic. But one of the things that we wanted to say as well was it's important for us to, if you have any suggestions or anything that you'd like in terms of feedback or bits and pieces in terms of this process, certainly reach out to us at Digital at Simos. We've had a few people come through and ask us some great questions, so we enjoy fielding that feedback, but certainly feel free to email if you have any feedback or suggestions that you'd like in terms of the content that we're producing. So Matt, before we kick into this, because we might have some people again on the webinar today which haven't met yourself before, we've used this slide a few times though, so I might just focus on the pertinent point that I enjoy the most. Matt, how are you currently tracking in the footy tipping at Simos?
Oh, I've had better years and better weeks. I'm struggling a little bit, but there's still a little bit to go in the season, so hopefully I'll be right.
Well, there's still plenty of time left, Matt, but just out of interest, who is leading the footy tipping at the moment in the office?
Ashley and Ron might be leading the footy tipping, so I've got some chasing to do.
Got some chasing to do, absolutely. Well, Matt, look, just for the audience in terms of your role at Simos, do you want to just talk us through, I guess, the work that you do at Simos from sales and leasing perspective?
Obviously focusing on leasing, sales, new listings, and obviously bringing in new managements to the business. And that's basically the 4 core areas that I really try to focus on.
And it's great too, because I mean, obviously you're an investor yourself, and we've spoken about this a few times. So you keep a good pulse on the market there, and really the forward face in terms of working with the customers, whether they be in that leasing or sales space. But again, Matt, I just thank you for taking us on this journey and really helping us with the knowledge that you have in terms of what you take and what you see out there in the market. So look, let's actually get into the topic today, Matt. So obviously people getting out there and marketing their commercial properties is what Simos really help customers to do and find buyers or sellers or even potential leases. But before we kick into digital, so that's the platforms that we use online, I wanted to really just ask that question of you of, I mean, what is involved in marketing a commercial property? What are the things that you do, and how does it really work outside of just the digital space?
Obviously, there's a number of ways you can market a property, whether it be commercial or residential. You've got obviously your internet spaces, but you've also got your boards, your window stickers, your social media marketing these days, your Instagrams, your Facebooks, your LinkedIn's. You've got your database mail outs. We're still doing some physical mail outs here and there, but most of it's done online these days with the main commercial websites.
Yeah, and I mean, how does it really compare, I guess, to residential? Do you see any differences in terms of the marketing approach with commercial to residential?
The residential has typically been all about flashy ads, being really promoting the business. They also promote the property well and truly before the person steps in the door in the residential. They really want to get that emotional side through their photos and their marketing on realestate.com or Domain, whichever one it may be. And in commercial, it's more about numbers. So we're more looking at the size of the property, the rate per square meters, what the property looks like. Can it, if you're looking at industrial, does it have good access for trucks? All that sort of thing is more important rather than making an emotional connection.
Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense. And obviously in residential, you do see some very flashy campaigns in terms of the different properties that are out there. And obviously there's different degrees of commercial property marketing as well. Some of the larger properties would obviously have a much bigger budget, but then in certain areas as well, there's different configurable items for smaller budgets as well, right?
Yeah. Look, yes and no. I mean, we've sold $10 million properties in the past on basic listings on $600-700 of marketing. So it really
Wow.
depends on the client, depends on the property, depends on the suburb and where it's going. So yes, you can go and spend tens of thousands of dollars if you really want to. In some areas, it's necessary. In some areas, it's not.
Mm. Well, and this question here, I mean, what are the digital platforms out there to market your property? I mean, when we talk about a digital platform, we obviously mean wherever people go to actually search for to potentially lease or purchase a property. I mean, let's actually dive into those platforms that you see out there, Matt, and really talk through them. So, look, I mean, out of these platforms that we have on here, I mean, there's Real Commercial, Domain, Commercial View. Which of these is really the dominant platform from your perspective?
Real Commercial is definitely the dominant platform there. Real Commercial is realestate.com in the residential world. They certainly have a strong customer base and draw to their website. They probably get 60 to 70% of the inquiry across the board. Commercial real estate certainly coming second in that regard, and then you've got your domains and commercial views, property guides. Certainly, we still get inquiries from them. Certainly, still worth being on their sites. The interesting one is obviously we all know Real Commercial is getting a lot of leads, but commercial real estate has a heavy connection with Google. And if you're driving down the street and you type in that property address into Google and it's for lease or for sale, it will generally, in most instances, come up as a commercialrealestate.com listing. So that's a little feature that commercial real estate has sort of worked on over the last, I'd say, 18 months, 2 years to try and capture a bit more market from Real Commercial. And I think it's a really good feature.
And I guess how does, because I mean, there's obviously a multitude of options that exist within each one of these platforms because they are inherently a business. So their job is to sell advertising out there to attract potential buyers, as you said, people looking to lease property. How do they all support each other? Do you see a lot of, I guess, cross-pollination of an ad, or do people typically focus in one platform when they're marketing?
Look, obviously, as I said before, the focus is Real Commercial in terms of getting the most out of it. But if they all have basic, enhanced, elite options to scale up your marketing wherever you need to. I think that if you got not budget conscious, or you got tens of thousands to spend on marketing, yes, your Real Commercial can offer all that in a big way. But if you're a little more budget conscious, you can get an elite listing on commercial real estate for half the cost of Real Commercial. So there is definitely some differences there. They all offer the same options, but it really depends on the property and depends on the suburb.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because this whole webinar is really helping people, I guess, demystify how to assign that budget, or I guess the advice that people provide in terms of where to use that budget, because you would have a marketing budget associated with you selling or leasing a property. But it's a really important point there, Matt. It actually leads really well onto that question. I mean, how do the business models actually work across these different platforms? So, I mean, how do people typically engage in those tiers that exist in the platforms?
So typically you've got your basic listing, you've got your enhanced listing, you've got an elite listing, and some of the tiers have an elite plus or a platinum listing, etc., which is obviously your very top tier, your biggest ad, it costs the most. Some of the benefits of that elite listing, it can draw buyers from, or lease prospects from, not only the suburb it's listed in, but surrounding suburbs that may be searched as well. So there are some little hidden features in those very larger ads. One of the other features of the elite listing, which we'll go through those couple of those, but if you're scrolling through, you can scroll through the photos on that search page rather than clicking into that ad and then having to click into those photos and scroll through them, which is just a little thing that it makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah, and do they all sort of have a common, I guess, thread in how you work with them? Do they all sort of work in that idea of a package that you purchase for marketing your property?
Yeah, so obviously agents subscribe to a package with all of these websites.
Got you. Yep.
Obviously, all those packages cost money to be involved in.
Yep.
And then you've got various packages with certain agents where you can do a basic subscription. Some agents do an elite only subscription, so every property in there needs to be an elite basis, which means obviously we can offer that basic, enhanced, and elite, and we can do a basic package quite a lot cheaper than some other agents. On the second thing, if we do an elite, it can cost a little bit more, but you add in that flexibility for clients.
Yeah, and I guess that's really an important point there is that the advice that that you guys are really doing from day to day is helping people through that. And let's actually dive into that, because I think we said the dominant platform was really real commercial. So let's just use that example if it's one that's sort of prevalent in how most market, obviously the price could change, but how most people go to market. I mean, Matt, we're looking at this side here, and I see a few tiers from basic to elite plus. I think, you know, for us, it's important to I guess, draw some distinction. You mentioned some numbers there. What's the sort of entry point for marketing a property?
So the entry point is obviously that basic listing, as you see on the at the bottom of that left or the far right. It is a much smaller ad. You get a little bit of a photo, and then you get the address and usually a size. So in terms of if you're looking at a warehouse with a photo and a size, typically that can be enough for many things. If it's a major development site, it's a very flashy, retail shop, you might decide to go for that elite listing that, really brings a bit more exposure to that building.
And then up at the top end of town, where we're seeing that elite plus, it looks like a pretty fantastic ad taking most of the page. What are you typically looking at there in terms of budget for marketing in that regard?
Look, your budget would want to be, $6,000 to $8,000 plus to get into that elite plus area. And I don't think that in majority of the cases it's probably not necessary. Most of our people go for that basic enhanced area because it's enough for the commercial world. The development sides in most of the residential market hits that elite listing because they obviously want to promote all that development, or they want to draw that emotional side for the larger photos and easy scrolling for residential projects.
And in this top line here, I mean, we're seeing at the basic level, this is obviously taken directly from realestate.com.au, so there's a bit of marketing information in here from their regard, but they're saying at the basic level, it's the lowest number of inquiries per listing, and then obviously at elite plus, 14.6 times the inquiries. So they obviously have a lot of data in terms of the levels of inquiry that gets. But for you, when you're
having said that, I mean, when you're looking at that sort of number, that is very averaged across the board of suburbs.
Yeah.
So if you're in St Kilda where there's 20 pages of listings and the first 4 pages are elite listings, yes, you do need to be an elite listing to be competitive. You go with a basic listing in the middle of St Kilda, that you might be on page 4 or 5 before you start. So every click in that suburb is going to be an elite, which means it adds to that, 8.9 times what it says there, inquiry rate. Whereas if you're in a Cheltenham, a Mentone, a Braeside, majority of the listings are basic. You might get a few enhanced, you might get 1, maybe 2 elites if you're lucky. And that's where in some of those suburbs, you don't necessarily need to have an elite listing or spend $6,000-7,000 on marketing. A basic listing will get you through, and you'll still be on page 1. It's really important to check out that suburb and what's there at the moment, and really review that before you start pumping in, $2,000 and $3,000 and $10,000 worth of marketing.
Yeah, and I really want to touch on that a bit more, because the way that this business model really works for, I guess, real commercial is they're selling where your listing exists in terms of a search. So if I search Bayside, where does my listing rank in terms of the searches that are there for all of the properties of the person that searched? But then also they're selling obviously the real estate size on the page in terms of how they do that as well. So they're very encouraged to sell as many elite plus.
That's right.
But Matt, from your perspective, I mean, part of that advice, what's the process that you really go through to help customers understand what to invest? It's obviously very easy to say, go with Elite Plus and you'll get the greatest result. But how do you really help customers through that process?
I think you've really got to look at the type of property it is first. Secondly, you've got to look at how much budget the client's got, but also really how many properties are currently for lease, for sale in that category, in that suburb. So if there's only 4 or 5 properties on the market, let's call it industrial. There's only 4 or 5 industrial properties in Mentone at the moment. Why do you need to go elite when you're already with a basic listing? You're already gone on page 1. Yeah, you might be listing number 3 or 4 on the page, but you're still going to be visualized immediately on that search page. So you really need to be checking. If you really want to go elite, by all means, you can. But as an agent and an owner here, I'm not one to tell you to go and spend $6,000 if you don't need to spend it. Yeah. And the old sort of story of residential is everyone's got an elite, everyone's got flashy ads, everyone's got this. And if you don't have it, you're sort of looked like, is there something wrong with the property? Is it not as expensive? Is it not as good? Commercial is very different.
Yeah.
You look at other things. So the biggest the ad is not always the most effective.
Doesn't always have the greatest impact. So yeah. I am intrigued at that, Matt, in terms of, obviously customers will choose, but also, as you said before, it's important to understand the competitive nature. I want to get my property out there and get it front of mind and as many inquiries as possible because I really need to get it leased. Where have you seen a situation where an elite or elite plus has really, helped someone do something in terms of getting someone in or a good buyer into the property?
Yeah, as I said before, if you're in a very prominent suburb, you're in Glenfrey Road, one of those big long shopping strips, but it's typically 7 or 8 pages of listings at any one time. You want to market that big showroom or that retail shop as a very expensive looking shop. It's got to be the top tier. You want to see it on page 1. You might need to have that elite listing to really capture those really professional photos, scroll through it. You want to see everything through the street. That's the position where you want to be, showing your property at its best.
Yeah.
On the flip side, as I said, your run-of-the-mill 1980s warehouse in the middle of Moorabbin, that the bigger photos are probably going to show up more cracks in the bricks than anything. You don't need to have that expensive ad. Your basic listing is going to be fine. Yeah. And it's all about price and value for money there, and rates per square metre. And as I said before, we've sold multi-million-dollar, $10 million properties on budgets, on basic listings with $700 worth of marketing. Yeah. And at the time, it was the only development site and the only property sitting there in Mordialloc. And, our database, along with marketing there, it absolutely did the job perfectly fine.
And it is interesting because we in the previous webinars, we've obviously been talking about that there is a potential supply or a lack of supply in the market at the moment. So do you sort of see that running through? Simos has a fair number of leasing properties up for lease at the moment. Do you see that playing out in terms of not needing to use these big budget ads?
Well, I think two-pronged approach there. And to answer that question, obviously people don't want to spend the money at the moment if they don't have to. Everyone's watching their dollars at the moment. But secondly, you haven't got as many listings on the market in any given suburb. So maybe in the city, there's probably a lot of listings at the moment in offices, but in where we concentrate on, your Moorabbins, your Cheltons, your Braysides, there's not as many listings. And when there's 8 pages and now there's only 3, it's even more now. You don't necessarily need that big elite listing. Your basic and your enhanced is very good value for money. Your enhanced is only an extra, $500-$600 on top of that to get that slightly bigger ad, to get that slightly more prominent position. You're going to be either at the top or just under one of the elites at the moment. And that's the very, it's most common, the enhanced at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess in certain properties, it would make a very big difference not over-investing in marketing where you don't need to, because you did make that pretty clear, Matt, that we could be talking the difference of a few $100s to nearly $8,000-$9,000 or just a little bit less in terms of that marketing. But recouping is a
That's
big
right. You
part.
might go and spend $2,000 to $4,000 on an elite listing, but in most cases, I'd rather see you organise an enhanced listing and get really good professional photos and a floor plan.
Yeah.
And often than those photos, and obviously we're doing videos now of all the properties. That's where I'd spend the money on that, rather than a great big elite listing, unless it's an absolute ripper of a property. It's a one-off thing in the middle of Brighton or St Kilda or a very prominent suburb.
Yeah. It makes a lot of
You've got to
sense.
watch out what you're spending.
Yeah, and it's great to provide that advice, I guess, because otherwise people don't really know which way to turn. So Matt, I guess finishing up here, I mean, we've had a couple of comments. Thank you so much for the feedback, guys. But really, I mean, you touched on it just at the end there, which is if people are defining the marketing budget in terms of, you know, how quickly they might need to get the property leased or sold, there's ways of configuring that budget to get the best outcome. I guess in that final statement though, Matt, what's your tip to choose the right tier, or I guess even the right marketing plan for a property itself?
Oh, look, and you can do this before you even meet up with either myself or whoever the agent is. The first thing really is to click on the suburb where your property is. See how many listings are currently there. Note down how many big elite listings there are, and how many pages of listings. And whether there might be a lot of listings in retail and office, but there might not be any 3 listings in industrial. So really look at how many properties there are at any one time on that particular area. The type of property really is important, because if it's as a run-of-the-mill warehouse, it might be a retail shop. There might be 20 retail shops currently available.
Yeah.
But if you're only going to have a retail shop that's for lease for $20,000 a year in rent, you're not going to go and spend $4,000 on marketing. So you might decide to put on the basic listing, but then do a bigger board on the property. So spend your money in elsewhere rather than spending it on the big internet ad. So there's obviously there are various types of marketing we do, but I think really doing your homework and checking out the suburb, checking out the real commercials, and then come and talk to us, and we can talk you through exactly what it is proposing and why we propose it.
Yeah, and that's
a real benefit of spending more money in other areas as well.
It's a really important point, Matt, and a really good segue, because we've got a question here as well. Is, I mean, what percentage of inquiry comes from the internet? I mean, Matt, from your perspective, I know that you receive a significant number of emails and inquiries on properties, but what percentage do you think really comes from those internet platforms these days?
Look, I think you're still up into that, 70, 80, 90% mark on those things. I mean, some of these quieter industrial properties tucked in the middle of nowhere. Actually, we get quite a lot of interest from boards of people driving past, coming out of their factory and just driving past the board saying, "Oh, wow, that's for lease. That might be a great spot for us to move to." In the same in the retail world, people are not necessarily always looking on the internet for a property. They might drive down the street and go, "Okay, that shop's now for lease. That might be a great opportunity for us to move our property, our business up into that shop."
Yeah.
So a board is very important. I think it's very effective. Making sure that you can see the board is also another thing to really consider.
Yeah.
Just because you've got a board up, is it going to be lost in amongst 50 other retail boards for shops? Are people going to be able to see it if they're driving past and the board is up on the top of the canopy? So that's all very important. But
no, and thank you for providing that answer there, Matt. I think it's really interesting, because where we landed in this, we're really focused on those digital platforms, but it sounds a lot like it's all the different channels coming together to really equal that outcome, which is great. And thank you everyone for their questions as well. Well, Matt, appreciate your time again. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. It's been great. And again, if anyone has any questions for us, digital@simos.com.au, or potentially reach out to Matt as well. Matt, have yourself a lovely day.
thank you, Soren. And as I said before, if anyone's got some topics they really want to learn about, either give me a call, dropping an email, or drop an email to Digital, and we can certainly try and cover those in future.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Matt. See you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mike.